Essentially, the way that I sort of see it is that there is, so, we were talking about pain and the definition of pain, and then we're looking at the sensory inputs, right? That nociceptive input that's coming into the brain, all right, and then the interpretation, all right, and then that interpretation by the brain, it goes to now they know that it actually goes to 44 different areas of the brain, okay, or more. We don't know, right? Probably the better as we get better in terms of diagnostics and whatnot, we're going to be able to probably see more areas of the brain. And based on where it goes or how it goes to those areas or how we have been nurtured or natured throughout our lifetime, we're gonna process that input and create an experience in the present moment, and that's going to be our experience, right? And so, as pain management physician, I look at that and I say, "Oh, that's very interesting." Okay, so if this is the software, I know how the hardware works because the hardware is the brain. Okay, and we know that, for instance, if I give a repetitive input to this hardware, that there's going to be a learning process that's actually going to occur. Okay. And there's and we know that, for instance, if things are associated in our life, neurons that wire together fire together. So if there's an association between pain and an emotion, pain and sadness, pain and depression, pain and anxiety, that those are going to be wired together. And so we know that, for instance, if you go through something that causes you to be increased anxiety, that it's more likely than not that your pain's going to increase, even though nothing happened to the tissue that caused any increased damage to that. Right. So we know that that's sort of, okay, this is how the hardware works. Right. So now what's the software? Right. Well, the software is actually being sort of created through life, right? As we go through all of our experiences, as we have support or we don't have support, or we're left alone to deal with whatever happens in our life, that those inputs then start creating certain ways that the brain is connecting, that different brain regions are connecting to each other. And strengths of those connections and neurotransmitters that are released, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that's where we're at now, which is sort of like, oh, I wish I would have known this 20 years ago, but that's okay, right? That goes back to the judgment of like, oh, we don't need that. Here I am right now. Okay, so if I'm here right now, and I'm starting to kind of understand this, and we have a new relationship with pain, right? Or whatever it might be. It's like, wow, maybe could this be hope for a new relationship? Well, what we looked at last time was that software. And essentially, could we do a practice like a mindfulness practice, a meditation practice, coming back to the present moment practice? And in my opinion, what that does is that starts to shift the software of how the software is actually able to process the information that is being inputted. Okay. What's the information that's being inputted? And well, if this is the information that's being inputted, then how can we, through time and practice, and again, that repetitive attentional practice and repetitive intentional practice, right? The rip rap that we've been talking about. How can we actually rewire the brain to make it such that now, if the same input comes in, I can actually process that input a little bit differently and spit out a different experience? Okay. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking at purely the software of how it's interpreting the signal. All right. And we talked a little bit about this. Okay. How can we, when we come back to the present moment, when we do things like mindfulness practice, and there's that sort of shift in self-referential areas in the brain, where where, well, maybe the burnt hand from the stove is not the worst thing that has happened to you. And we don't need to go into a catastrophe about it because it's a small little burn. And I know that there's annoyance from maybe something else that happened in your day, and the burn just sort of exacerbated that 10,000 fold. But when it's compounded like that, the burn is going to affect the emotions that were present prior, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So can I be more in the present moment? Can I see it as a sensation and not go into not create an entire meaning about it? Right. And can I just do what's necessary to heal whatever was injured? And that's it, right? Okay. Then, right, so that's one aspect of it. And I hope I'm being clear in terms of like this meditation practice or these practices that bring us back to the present moment are sort of, in my opinion, small rewirings of the brain such that if the same input comes in, we can process it slightly different, therefore creating a different experience so that we can have a different relationship with the same sensory input. And that's our different relationship with pain. It's like, oh, wow. Yeah, I feel that sensory input, but now it's safer. It's okay. I don't need to catastrophize around it. Okay. And so that's the practice where we're actually shifting the software so that the same input spits out a different experience. All right. I hope that makes sense. But then there's the other thing, right? Which is the input. Okay. So can we actually shift the input? All right. So this is a similar thing, right? Repetitive intentional practice and repetitive attentional practice. Now what we're saying is, well, yeah, we're paying attention to that input. Okay. And I know the input, but can I shift the input? We're going to already work on shifting the software by constantly trying to come back to the present moment. How am I now? Rewiring the brain to be more present. Rewiring the brain to, let's say, not jump to catastrophe immediately. Right? But can we also use the RIPRAP, the repetitive intentional and repetitive attentional practice, to actually shift the input? So now not only are we helping to shift the way that the brain processes an input, but we're also shifting the actual input itself. Okay. So yes, we use things like medication, we use topicals, right? That's going to shift the input. Maybe we get an injection. Maybe we need to repair the damaged tissue, right? Fine. But we get the surgery. There's still pain. Okay. Now, what are the other inputs that are actually coming in? Well, there's still the sensory component, right? So maybe I can rub the area with my hand and change the input using touch. Maybe I can hold that area softly or calmly or with love, with loving intention, right? Sending loving intention to that area, rubbing it, using things like a TENS unit, an H-wave device, ice, heat, acupressure, acupuncture, right? Manipulation, whatever it might be, strengthening the area, even doing some gentle range of motion, getting the blood flow to go to that area. So yes, I'm trying to actually shift the sensory input as well. And looking at the definition of pain, right? It's a sensory component and also an emotional component. So what's the emotional input that's coming in simultaneously to my brain that's repetitive? Only you know, right? And how can look, I'm being aware of this real negativity, this anger, this fear. And I'm really working on even allowing that. Okay, I'm angry. Yeah, I'm angry. Okay. And yet seeing if through that allowance, coming back to the present moment, can there be a shift of that input to come up with a different emotion? Maybe there's one of hope. Maybe there's one of gratitude. That, irregardless of what the damage is, I'm still breathing. I could still taste this pizza, this water. I can hug somebody and hold somebody, right? That I can have that felt sense of love. Okay. That I'm alive. Right. So now what we're doing is we're looking at, okay, I have these practices that are really working on upgrading my software, so that if I upgrade my software, my hardware, I know how my hardware works, but maybe it can work even more efficiently. I'm upgrading my software so that the same stimulus, let's say that noxious, really unpleasant stimulus that's coming from my hand or my shoulder or whatever that is, comes in, and I can process it differently to spit out a different experience. But can I also work on shifting the input? And I know that the input is coming from sensations and also emotions, but there's also an input coming in from my thoughts. So if we look at all three of those inputs, sensations, emotions, and thoughts, and saying, well, I'm working on the software, sort of reorganizing the software that's actually interpreting the inputs, but can I also work on shifting the inputs? Okay. And so for that situation, right, it's being aware. First, it's being aware of the inputs that we have. Here are my sensory inputs. Okay, what can I do to alter them if I choose to? I can put some lotion on, I could move it, I can put a TENS unit on it, whatever it might be. Okay, we're taking care of we're shifting the sensory. Okay, let's look at all the other senses though. Right? Do I have aromatherapy? Can I alter the senses coming in through my nose? Can I alter my senses that are coming in through my ears? We just talked about sound. What sound is actually soothing to me, causing calm, relaxation. Okay? If I'm in pain and I play something that annoys me, guess what's going to happen to my pain? It's going to go up. Not because there's more damage to the tissue, just because of the way that the brain is processing all this sensory input. Okay. So I want to find things from a sensory stimulus perspective that I can literally, I'm sort of altering the sensation that is coming into my brain that then can spit out a different experience. And then we get to our emotions and thoughts. Right. And so the number one way to be aware of your emotions and thoughts, or to sort of to number one, to shift them, is first of all to be aware of them. We need to be aware of them. So bring awareness. That's that allow, right? Allow and acknowledge. That's the A train we've talked about. All right. Get on the A train. Let's allow and acknowledge. Okay. Wow, I have a lot of negativity. I have a lot of fear. I have a lot of anxiety. And I'm very self-critical. I beat myself up a lot when I feel the pain. I feel like maybe I should be doing better, doing more. So there's a lot of thoughts, there's a lot of emotions, and guess what? All those then are going in to the software with our sensations and are spitting out our experience. Okay. So with a repetitive intentional practice and a repetitive attentional practice, what we can do is we can not only, and this to me is the brilliant part, is we're not only working on actually rewiring the software, to be able to be more in the present moment, such that when that really strong sensation or emotion comes in, we can actually process it differently. But we can also work on altering the input. That yes, as soon as you feel that pain, you might go towards that anxiety and fear and catastrophizing. You recognize that mindfully. You say, hello, I see you, but for right now, I am going to choose to be grateful. And guess then what you do consciously? You consciously then do an exercise that brings a sense of gratitude to your being, despite the unpleasant sensory input that's coming in. Look, that's going to be there anyways. So are you going to go into fear, or are you going to go into gratitude? Your choice, actually. Okay. So then what happens is that now we're shifting the stimulus that's actually coming in as we're practicing these practices that are working on rewiring the brain such that the stimulus is actually going to be processed differently. That's why I keep coming back to this, right? I love this language: repetitive, intentional, and repetitive, attentional, right? Practice, rip rap, love it. Because not only are we rewiring the brain doing this to shift the interpretation of the signals that are coming in, but we're also actually able to shift the inputs that are coming in. We could recognize the emotions that we're having. We can allow them to be. We can acknowledge them, and we could say, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. And I choose to be grateful at this moment. It goes back to the wise tale of the wolf, right? Which wolf are we feeding? Okay. Are we feeding the fearful wolf, or are we feeding the wise wolf? Which one are we feeding? Oh, wow. Is it really my choice? That puts the power into your hands. Okay. And just like we've spoken about in the past, you choose where to put your attention. Yes, all of society and all of pain is trying to grab your attention. Okay. They want you to click on that link so that you go to the next website and click on the next link and click on the next link and click on the next link. And that is called clickbait. And pain is exactly the same thing. You feel it, and guess what? Boom, latch onto it, go. Now here we are. Danger, fear, anxiety, stress, catastrophizing. Right? Now, as we discussed, acutely, that's important. Right? I just broke my arm. Okay, might be dangerous. I got to get some help. Right? Having chest pain from a heart attack, get to the emergency room. Somebody's got to open up your arteries. But in the chronic pain phase, not so much. Not so much. And that's really what we're focusing on here. Okay. So again, keeping in mind that when we do these practices, especially for chronic pain, in my opinion, what we're really doing is we are rewiring the brain such that the input that's coming in, regardless of what that input is, can be processed differently, and then we spit out a different experience, which is the definition of pain, your individual experience. And using the same practice, we are shifting, acknowledging, right? Allowing and acknowledging, saying thank you. If you wish, you kind of just stay over there. And then bringing in through the riprap, through the intentional practice, intentional being compassion, self love. Where do you want to put your attention? And do that over and 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 over again. Because we know how relentless pain can be, right? Man, is it there? It's always there. That nagging, chronic, persistent, stabbing, burning, pulsating, right? It's there. Guess what? That's a signal. Bum, 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 bum. And you're saying, I hear you, man. Guess what? I'm gonna start beating my own beat. Bop, bada, bop, 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 bada, bop, 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 bop. You're dull down there. I'm gonna start beating. Let's get some cymbals in there. Okay. All right. I hope this makes sense because to me, this is sort of like the foundation of using these sorts of practices for pain, and the neuroscience is going to tell us exactly what it's doing, but the practice is important. It's really coming down to what are you doing? How are you doing your rip rap? How are you doing your intentional practice, your attentional practice? And then how are you ultimately developing a new relationship to your unpleasant sensory inputs, which are being interpreted? And now it's like, oh, I have a different relationship here. Maybe I even stop calling it pain. Okay. Okay. So with that, I hope that makes sense. With that, we will go into our practice of, again, rip rap. Rip rap. Repetitive attentional practice. This time, really looking at shifting the inputs. Okay. Okay, so let's find a comfortable posture. A posture you feel relaxed, yet alert. Closing your eyes if you feel comfortable closing your eyes. If not, having a soft downward gaze. Taking 2 or 3 deep breaths. Allowing yourself to be fully supported by the surface you're on. Releasing any stress or tension that you may feel, if you can, or even just the intention of releasing it. And if you feel any part of your body that you wish to move or reorient at this time, do so. And bringing yourself and your attention to your anchor or your resource. And as you're paying attention to your anchor, as you are directing your attention to your anchor or resource, simply open up to your experience in this moment. Bringing awareness to the inputs that are coming in, whether they are sensory, emotional, or cognitive thoughts. What are the inputs that you are noticing in this moment? And now, if you are happy and content or pleased with those inputs, and you're happy and pleased and content with your experience at this moment, then just continuing to practice your mindfulness. If you are not, then let's try to take one input, whatever that might be, and first acknowledge it, maybe even say hi to it. Maybe it's a strong sensation or an emotion or a thought that just keeps lingering and coming back. We acknowledge it. We say hello. And for this practice, we're choosing to shift it. Not necessarily needing to change that input in any way, but just choosing to pay attention to a different input consciously. If there is a strong sensation, maybe paying attention to what you are smelling or hearing. Maybe pay attention to what you are seeing. And if your eyes are closed, what you're seeing in your mind's eye. If there's an emotion, acknowledging whatever emotion is present and seeing if you can bring in a new emotion of gratitude, love, appreciation for something that is present in your life right now. If it's a thought, acknowledging the thought, and seeing if you can bring in a different thought, maybe a prayer, maybe a mantra, a word or phrase that is authentic to you, maybe a thought of gratitude, of appreciation. And if that thought stimulates an emotion, allowing that emotion. And just seeing, can we use this practice to shift the inputs that are coming in? And notice your experience. Does it change in any way? Or does it stay the same? Simply noticing. You don't have to try any harder. We're just allowing and redirecting, allowing and reorienting, but we're doing so consciously. You direct your attention. And just noting your present moment experience. And bringing your attention back to your anchor or resource. And again, noting how that feels. What is your experience with that? Opening your eyes if your eyes were closed. Taking a few deep breaths. Reorienting yourself to your room. Stretching or moving if you feel like you need to stretch. And just taking a moment to reflect on your practice.